Hello, welcome to Maltbox, the non-chill filtered whisky blog. I'm Andy and this is whisky review number 56. What I have for you today is the first bourbon on the channel actually. I'm surprised it's taken me this long because I'm a bit of a bourbon fan. And that comes in the form of the Four Roses small batch from Four Roses Distillery in Kentucky. There you go. Really nice bottle. So it is. That noise. Right, so as I say, this is the first bourbon that I've actually had on the channel. So sorry it's taken me so long. And apologies in advance if the cat makes an appearance as well, because he's back down here now. Just to press the record button. So I look forward to his appearance imminently. Bourbon. Let's talk about bourbon, shall we? Just wanted a little bit of a sniff first. So, bourbon. And that is how it's pronounced. Bourbon, not bourbon, bourbon. Bourbons are little chocolate biscuits. They're disgusting. They're like the chocolate equivalent of custard creams and should be banned. So, moving on. Bourbon, yes, right. Bit of a myth with bourbon. It doesn't have to be distilled at a distillery in Kentucky. It's just that happens to be where a lot of it is distilled. You can make bourbon anywhere in the US. In fact, technically, you could make it anywhere in the world. Now, there's a couple of rinky-dinks, I'd probably describe them, that classifies bourbon as bourbon. The prerequisites, you might describe them as. Varying types of bourbon. A bit like the Scotch Whisky Association, who set certain, and the EU I suppose as well, who set certain regulations to what requirements are needed to be met in order to be called Scotch Whisky, for example. That is mirrored in America with the bourbon industry. Now, firstly, bourbon, the actual mash itself must contain at least 51% corn. The rest of it can be made up of a mixture of either wheat or malted barley, or, well, that's pretty much it really. I mean, there are a couple of other things you can put in there. Also, bourbon doesn't actually have to be aged for a particular time before it has to be called bourbon. You can purchase bourbon in the US that has been matured for a couple of months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be 3 years, for example, like Scotch whisky. A couple of other things. We'll go through them in little bits, but you know, just a few others while we get started. It can't be distilled to a strength over 80%. It then cannot enter a cask at any strength higher than 62.5%. I'm going to go on to a few more later. Let's concentrate on this. So, Four Roses small batch. Small batch, as I mentioned, is a Kentucky bourbon whisky. However, it is also a Kentucky straight bourbon whisky. Slight difference which we will go into. It's bottled at 45% and it is in an EU bottle list, so it is a 70 centilitre, it's not a litre, or 75 centilitres, should I say. That's probably it, isn't it? In terms of colour, really nice, almost light iron brew colour. It is like iron brew, I've never spotted that before. So, and it's worth noting, it's actually natural colour, and that is something else I'm going to go on to in a moment. Some nice legs going down the glass. That is admittedly quite a healthy portion, but to be honest with you, it's something I deserve it. Right, on the nose. Oh, really nice vanilla, spice, cinnamon. There's pencil shavings in there as well. Sort of like a little cherry note in there as well, maybe. Cherry pie, really sugary crust. Slightly prickly, it is 45%. But to be honest with you, I think that does wonders for this whisky. Now, this is actually it's not a blend as such, it's sort of akin to a single malt. This is actually made up of 4 different bourbons. So it's not a blended malt, it comes from, well, the American equivalent, or the bourbon equivalent should I say, because it is effectively the equivalent of a single malt. You know, it comes from one distillery. It doesn't say anything about chill filtration, it does not say anything about added colour, but again I will go on to the colour in a moment. There are quite a few Four Roses bottlings available in the UK and Europe. I've got a couple more on the shelf. I have the yellow label, which is sort of, in fact no I don't have that, I finished that the other day, which is why I'm starting with this one. I've got a single barrel. They also do the yellow label in Europe, which is basically like their entry level standard. It's about 15 quid, it's really cheap. That's quite good for old fashions and cocktails really, to be honest with you. There's a lot of different single barrel batches which are really good and very well priced at the moment in the UK. For example, you can pick them up on Amazon for 30 quid, which is a phenomenal price for that whisky. That's bottled about 50%. As I said before, it's Kentucky distillery, but not all bourbon is distilled in Kentucky. Alright, let's just reinforce that. A lot of them are, but they don't have to be. Jack Daniels, for example, meets the prerequisites of being a bourbon. It's just not labelled as a bourbon because they don't want it to be. It doesn't have to be. Right, back onto the nose. Got distracted. I'm going to sound like a loon, which might not be a massive surprise to you all at this point. I just got a smell then of going into a paper shop when I was a kid, where there's like pick and mix sweets in jars, there's newspapers on the floor as you go in. It's that sort of like mix of smells, really weird, but in a very nice way. That's probably random tasting note number 7 of the series, of the channel so far. And I would say it's probably up there as one of the most ridiculous, I'll be honest. Sort of a nice sort of sugared plum thing going there. And again, overall, very sort of like warming spice, lots of vanilla. And to be honest with you, that is kind of a consistent theme with bourbon. You will pick up vanilla in pretty much any bourbon that you actually taste. So, onto the palate. Really nice mouthfeel. Initially quite smooth, and then all of a sudden there's your vanilla. You've got lovely warming spice that's come straight off the nose, now onto the palate. It's just like a little flavour pocket, there's an explosion. It just goes, and there it is, there's that spice. You've got cereals, you've got a really kind of like boiled sweet, candy sweetness going on now. What else? What is that? Like licorice laces. Going in again. It's going back up to the nose again after that. It's just all that spice is just still there. Such a spicy dram. It's not overly complex, I'll be honest with you. It is quite, I'm not going to say one-dimensional, I'll give it two-dimensional. He's going to jump up in a minute. But again, Demerara sugar, it's kind of on a theme, you know what I mean? That spice, vanilla, sugary things. It's again a recurring theme. But it's not unpleasant. There's something nice and satisfying and quite comforting about how simplistic this whisky is. And I don't mean that in a bad way. There's still quite a bit going on with it. When I get in from work and I have a relatively either unsuccessful day, should we say, or at the same time I have quite a good one, the first thing that I will have, I won't reach for a bottle of scotch. I won't reach for a 20-year-old single malt. I won't reach for a blended malt. I'll pick a bottle of bourbon off the shelf, because it's just one of those whiskies that you can put into a tumbler, don't need to worry about it, you don't need to pick it apart for half an hour. You can just get on with it. It's really honest, and I think that is what I like about bourbon. It's honest. And I'm going to go back to a few more boring facts for you. Now, I mentioned before that this is a straight bourbon whiskey. Now, in order to be credited with being straight bourbon whiskey, it must be at least, and this is at least, 2 years old. So, like I said before, bourbon itself can be anything from a few months to 2 years old. Anything over 2 years old is considered straight. Anything under 4 years old must have the age stated on the label. This does not have an age stated on the label, therefore I assume it might differ because it is not being sold out. It's being sold outside the US, it's being sold within the EU. I assume it still applies to the fact that it does not have an age statement on it, therefore that it is over 4 years old. Another good thing about straight bourbon whiskey. Ready? You're not allowed to put colouring in it. Hey. Natural colour. Natural colour. None of that E150 bollocks. Natural colour from the cask. That's it. And that's how Scotch should be. Why don't they look at bourbon and say, oh, they're actually doing alright, yeah. Nice, nice, we'll do that. Alright, that's fine, cool. No worries. Just do it, right? Moving on. Something I missed out to mention earlier. In order to be considered bourbon, this is generally speaking again, as well as being the 51% corn mash, etc, etc, it also has to be matured in charred and new oak casks, aka virgin oak. Basically what every Scotch whisky producer now is showing off about. Oh, look at this, it's matured in virgin oak. Wonderful, it's just a new cask. And that is why there are so many ex-bourbon releases and so many ex-bourbon casks available to Scotch whisky producers, because the American distilleries can't do anything with them anymore. They can't mature something in them again. They have to use new casks every single time. So they sell them and ship them off to Scotland. And the Scottish distilleries are like, oh great, thanks. It's mutually beneficial. Okay, now we're back. I am still getting that newspapery thing on the nose, you know. I'm not going mad. Maybe a little bit. Really love that texture. Again, spices, getting cloves, getting cinnamon. It's like when you open the spice cupboard and you've got loads of stuff in there. It's just like a medley of spices. Again, demerara sugar that I've mentioned before. I think caramelised demerara sugar in a pan. The finish is medium length. It is shock horror spicy. It is shock horror sweet. And unsurprisingly, it contains a little bit of vanilla. Overall, a really easily approachable, honest, affordable and enjoyable whisky, and that is exactly, it's the full package in those categories, because this retails for around, I think it's about 30 quid, it's 35 quid. It's actually on offer in M&S at the minute if you're in the UK for 27, and I suggest you pick one up because you won't find it cheaper than that online. It's a bargain for that amount. I've actually got two. I've got that one and I've got a closed one. I basically always have one on the shelf. This is one of those whiskies that if you have, you know, like you have constant on your shelves, this for me is one of them. Always got one in because it's consistent and it's affordable, as I say, and all those other things. So, after that little ramble, onto the scores. I'm going to give this whiskey an 86 out of 100. For me, as I say, it's affordable, it's approachable, yada yada yada. Just an all-round good egg, very easily drinkable, good stuff. Cheers, see you soon.